Yo, check this out. In this video, I'm going to share with you some ideas about moving through different states of consciousness. That sounds fancy and all that, but it really isn't. A lot of us like to internalize certain beliefs. We think we are this type of person. I am not good with money. I am poor. I don't have creative ideas. I am not healthy. But what Neville Goddard proposes is that we are not any of these things that we identify as, but we're shifting through different states. Now, I read a quote by him that I'm going to share with you, and it created a parallel with the work of another great mystic, Dr. David Hawkins from Power versus Force. So let's check out this quote here. Now, Neville says, "These unseen things are states of consciousness. All states exist. They are with us now. You and I are travelers, and we travel through states as a pilgrim travels through cities. I can travel through the state of poverty. I didn't like it, so I moved out of this state called poverty. But I don't destroy it. The state is there for everyone to enter." And it reminded me of the first time I visited Los Angeles, California, which was in 2018. It was actually the first time I came to the US. Now, I'm from Australia, Sydney, Australia, so flying to Los Angeles was very exciting because, you know, when you watch the movies, you're seeing all these heist movies and all this fun stuff happening in Los Angeles. It's like, seems bigger than life. But as I flew in, I looked outside the window and I kind of felt like, wait a second, where the hell are we going? This isn't Los Angeles. Like, because all the buildings were dark and gray and brown and dusty. They looked like crap. It looked like the place was hit by a nuclear bomb or something. The energy was very dense. You know, you look around and there's like a weird mist everywhere, this strange fog. So I landed in Los Angeles, and I remember asking for directions or asking something from one of the people that worked at the airport, and they just looked at me in like disgust, like, how dare you ask me this shit? Why are you asking me this question? So the vibe was very different. There were no toilets like anywhere to be seen. It just seemed like a weird place, and you know, the homeless epidemic was raging even way back then, you know, before, you know, we heard of fentanyl and all these crazy things. Different cities have different vibes. Rio de Janeiro, Tokyo, Sydney, wherever you are, there's a particular energy of that city, and people can come and go as they please. Now, what Neville is proposing here is that just as there are physical locations, right, physical places you can visit, there are states in the realm of consciousness, states in the realm of awareness. Just like different cities resonate with different people, each state has a corresponding vibe which will resonate with certain people. Take the state of poverty. It usually corresponds with the following ideas: pessimism, apathy, shame, desperation. The people in a state of poverty in Africa are not very different from the people in a state of poverty in Vietnam to people in a state of poverty in Chicago. It's the same thing. People in grief in Miami are not different from people in grief in Alaska. It's a state. It's a emotional place you can go, a mental place. Because remember, there are different realms where you exist. You know, you're in the physical realm, of course, like where we can interact here. But when you think, no one can see your thoughts. That's in the mental realm, right? And there's also a spiritual realm. So there's different realms, and in each of those places, there are different locations you can visit. And here's an interesting thing I was thinking of. When you enter a state, you take on the behavior of that attractor field of the state. Now, you might be thinking, what the hell is an attractor field? Now, I remember years ago, I used to be a big kind of geek when it came to chemistry and physics. I first learned of attractor fields when I was like 15. I would read the New Scientist magazine, watch countless documentaries on quantum physics and astronomy. One of the most interesting areas to look at was this field of chaos theory. And you might have seen a picture of what's deemed or what's been called the Lorenz's butterfly before. Now take a look at this image here. This is the butterfly, and you might have seen it. It looks cool, but not many people understand what it is. So here's a quick backstory of how this image came to be. Edward Lorenz was a scientist who was studying weather conditions. He came up with a model to predict the weather using a computer. Lorenz discovered that when he made small changes in his weather model, he started seeing that the outcomes were diverging drastically. So he tweaked the numbers a little bit for the starting conditions, and things would look drastically different. They would diverge. This happened because weather is a chaotic system. it is sensitive to initial conditions. You might have seen the iconic scene in Jurassic Park, the water droplet scene, where Jeff Goldblum, whose name is Dr. Ian Malcolm, is dropping, water on this woman's hand.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, now freeze your hand. Don't move. I'm going to do the same thing. Start with the same place again. Which way is it going to roll off?
Let's say back. Same way.
Same back.
And he explains to her that regardless of how similar the styling conditions are in terms of where he puts the drop of water, the water will flow in different directions when it lands on the hand. It might flow left, it might flow right, it might flow down this way. And you'd assume that it would flow the same way if you dropped it in the same place. But no, that's not the case. Because of small changes in the hands, small changes in temperature in the air, fluctuations of the wind, all these little things that we don't really think about, they can create drastically different changes. And this is the same reason why it's difficult to predict the weather. We have AI, we have all these supercomputers that can do marvelous things, but they can't tell you what the weather is going to be in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, because those small differences in initial conditions, small errors in calculations can compound drastically in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and you might actually have a hurricane that you didn't even know was going to happen, or you might have sunny weather. You don't really know what's going to happen. It can be completely different to what you expect, because the weather is a chaotic system. The hallmark of chaotic systems is sensitivity to initial conditions. Small changes in the beginning can create drastically different outcomes. It's not very predictable. And this is why we hear things like, if a butterfly flaps its wings in New Zealand, you might have a hurricane in Miami, when it comes to the weather. The butterfly effect, this idea of small changes, small actions we have trickling on and compounding and changing things drastically is a very popular idea. There's been so many movies made on the butterfly effect, and this all comes back to chaos theory. Let's go back to Lorenz here. He decided to put different initial conditions onto his graph, using some boring maths, some nonlinear equations. Those boring shit we don't really care too much about. However, what he discovered was astonishing. The mathematical plots and their outcomes over time produced a shape that looked like a butterfly, that Lorenz attractor we talked about before. No 2 points ever followed the same path, but they followed a similar pattern. There were 2 regions that they were looping around. These regions of attraction are called strange attractors in chaos theory.
The trajectory seemed to be attracted to this butterfly. This is what is referred to as the Lorenz attractor. A strange attractor.
This idea where there's some sort of hidden beauty, hidden patterns amongst seemingly chaotic data. Many years later, David R. Hawkins would borrow this idea from the field of physics and apply it to the realms of consciousness. So David R. Hawkins, who is famous for the maps of consciousness, which you might have heard of in books such as Power versus Force, is this guy who really showed me how attractive fields apply in the realm of consciousness and awareness. Now, you might have seen his chart. The map separates the different levels of consciousness from the lowest to the highest energy. The lowest level corresponding with the feeling of shame, the highest level being that of enlightenment. According to Hawkins, the scale was created through a mix of kinesiology, muscle testing methods, and the existence of invisible attractive fields of consciousness. Hawkins said, man is immobilized in his present condition by his alignment with enormously powerful attractor energy patterns, which he himself unconsciously sets in motion. In layman's terms, subconscious processes run the individual. Small changes in starting condition can lead to drastic changes in thought patterns. Changes in thoughts lead to changes in outer conditions. We know how this process works. You start thinking things differently, you start feeling the compulsion to do different actions, and then your outer world changes because you're putting things in motion, you're putting energy out into the world. This is why we see so many of the same behaviors in different people who are in different places. Remember the states we talked about before. Just like a point on Lorenz's butterfly follows a similar pattern around the attractor to other points, many people on Earth are unable to escape the pool of undesirable states. Attractor fields can also be seen as pendulums, according to the mystic Vadim Zeland, who wrote the book Reality Transurfing, which you might be aware of. So shifting through the infinite states, Neville Goddard says this: we're all moving through infinite states. You find you can go wherever you want to. It's not the privilege of the rich, it's the privilege of the man who can imagine. The realms of consciousness are invisible. They are weightless and operate by different rules. In the spiritual and mental realms, you need only to imagine what you want for it to become a reality. Those who have practiced lucid dreaming should be familiar with this concept. If you've ever had a lucid dream, a dream where you are aware of being in a dream whilst in the dream. Now that might sound trippy, but it's been scientifically proven to be a real thing. It used to be thought of as a mystical thing. It's incredibly fascinating because it really changes the way that you see reality, because you wake up in your dream, you realize that, oh shit, I'm dreaming. But instead of scaring yourself to the waking up state in the physical body, you stay within a alternate reality, basically a alternate realm, basically in your mind. Or some people might believe it's the astrals, who really knows. But in this inner realm, this realm of thought, this realm of mind, you can will things into existence. So if you just have the compulsion to fly, you say, I'm going to fly, you have that faith and you see yourself flying, you will literally start flying. If you want to walk through a wall and you believe you can do it, you can walk through the wall. If you imagine an elephant behind you, an elephant will show up. Right? If you are afraid, something will manifest and scare you some more. So it's kind of this incredibly reflective substance that this realm is made out of, which is quite different from the real world because everything here operates by laws. There's cause and effect, that things take time in order for you to see. A good book that talks about this concept is The Slight Edge, which shows the ramifications of your actions through time. In this physical domain, you need to wait a little bit for things to happen. So this idea of just calling things through faith is the reason Neville constantly says he calls a thing that is not seen as though it were seen, and the unseen becomes seen, which is a biblical quote. The quote's derived from a spiritual truth. To move through the states or the realms of consciousness, to move through different things that you want, you need to pay attention to where you are putting your attention, right? So you need to shift your attention. That's all you need to do, is to start thinking about different things, right? Because in the past, the stuff used to really piss me off when people talked about this, about law of attraction, and it sounded like the most woo-woo nonsense. But when you actually start applying it, you start shifting your attention from perhaps negativity, perhaps lack, poverty, to abundance, prosperity, leveling up. You see that you begin to attract different things, different opportunities, have a compulsion to do different things. You need to become the watchman of the gate, as Charles Hanel calls it. Charles Hanel is the author of the Master Key System. You need to be vigilant in terms of what inputs you are allowing into your mind, what content you are watching. A lot of people are constantly being programmed by the television, by TikTok, Instagram, because they don't have a watchman at the gate. They allow whatever nonsense that is being programmed by Big Daddy, Big Tech, and governments to infiltrate their minds. So you can't allow that to be. You need to really, really pay attention to where your focus is going. So you apply energy, mental energy, to assuming the new state, what you want to be: prosperity, abundance, health. This doesn't mean strain or stress in the way that you put attention to this new ideal. The process should happen naturally. You simply choose to focus on what you want to become and ignore the evidence of the senses. You ignore the things that are not in alignment with that new vision. So perhaps, you're working on growing your business. Right now, your business is doing 6 figures. You want to scale to 7 figures, maybe even 8 figures. But the people around you in your life are filled with discouragement. They've never seen that be done before. They don't believe in that even being possible. Maybe they're seeing all the risks inherent with growing a business. They're quite pessimistic, and they're just kind of messing up with your flow. You gotta let that go. You gotta ignore that. You gotta ignore the evidence of the senses and focus on the ideal. Focus on the spiritual idea, or what Thomas Troward says, the spiritual prototype of what you're trying to create. In time, you'll notice a change in your outer behavior. Now, James Allen explains this perfectly in his book, As a Man Thinketh. He talks about the youth who works in a workshop. Now, let me read this for you here, and this is directly from his book. I recommend you read it if you haven't read it. Here is a youth, hard pressed by poverty and labor, confined long hours in an unhealthy workshop, unschooled and lacking all arts of refinement. But he dreams of a better things. He thinks of intelligence, of refinement, of grace and beauty. He conceives of, mentally builds up an ideal condition of life. The vision of a wider liberty and larger scopes take possession of him. Unrest urges him to action, and he utilizes all his spare time and means, small though they are, to the development of his latent powers and resources. Very soon, so altered has his mind become that the workshop can no longer hold him. It has become so out of harmony with his mentality that it falls out of his life as a garment is cast aside. And with the growth of opportunities, which fit the scope of his expanding powers, he passes out of it forever. See, the youth leaves the state behind. Years later, we see this youth as a full-grown man. We find him a master of certain forces of mind, which he wields with worldwide influence and almost unequaled power. In his hands, he holds the cords of gigantic responsibilities. He speaks, and lo, lives are changed. Men and women hang upon his words and remold their character. And sunlike, he becomes the fixed and luminous center around which innumerable destinies revolve. He has realized the vision of his youth. He has become one with his ideal. The youth, through first imagining, becomes unsatisfied with his outer conditions. His mental shift ushers in a change in the physical world through the principle of correspondence. If you don't know what that is, you need to read the Kabbalion. As above, so below. The physical reflects the mental plane, as we talked about earlier. As you shift your attention, you gravitate towards attractors. Remember those attractors we talked about, Lorentz, the butterflies, more fitting towards the attainment of your goal. These invisible energy structures that pull you in. Imagine a point on Lorentz's butterfly shifting from one attractor to another. Soon you start thinking along similar lines to those who have walked before you. You will take what Neville calls the bridge of incidents. Now, you've heard these stories of different geniuses coming up with the same ideas at the same time, right? There's different cases of this, I can't think of it right now. Why is that? It's because they're plugged into the same thing. They're plugged into the same attractor that kind of gives people great insights for the development of humanity, while most people are plugged into destructive attractors that just destroy their bodies, make them eat foods that are not meant for them, that make them slaves into this 9-to-5 matrix type thing. They're part of that attractor. They're part of that script, right? So where you shift your attention will dictate the trajectory of your life, and the attractor will give you certain inspiration. Nikola Tesla always talks about this. He says that inspiration comes from the universe, comes from out there. Eventually, you start seeing your ideal for the second time. You would have already seen it spiritually. The minds of Andrew Carnegie and Henry Ford are not too different from those of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. The spirits of the greatest athletes of all time are similar across generations. They're influenced by the same attractive fields, and they have visited familiar mental states. So when will your pilgrimage begin? Do this, and I promise you'll be one step closer to living and dying well. Now, that was a bit of a dense video. A lot of concepts there, a lot of, I'll say complicated ideas that some people might not understand. But for those that do understand, you know the power of material like this, Neville Goddard stuff, David Hawkins stuff, all this mysticism, occult, or whatever you want to call it, stuff is really the foundation of success. You know, there's basic stuff, the general self-help stuff, it's a great place to start. You know, just as Neville says, it's a state. You know, you're in the beginner state. You're in the beginner state where you will really be influenced by beginner ideas. But as you delve deeper into improving yourself, into gaining next level success in terms of your business or your health or whatever you're trying to do in life, you need to really study these deeper aspects of reality. So hopefully that video was helpful. These are just some ideas I am kind of formulating in my mind. and I write about them all the time on my blog, therealizedman.com. So peace until next time. Thanks for watching the video. I appreciate you. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the bell notifications so we can see more of each other. Until next time.